Welcome, everybody, to tonight in the Mountain West Conference. I'm Steve Ivey. I'm here with Coach Tom Moser. Tom, how are you doing tonight?
I'm great, Steve. Thanks for asking. And what a day! We've said a few times on here now that we as fans of the conference, and I think most fans of the conference can accept and acknowledge that the conference is not what it was last year in terms of the quality from 1 through 6 or 7. But I've said to you, and you've concurred, that look, when we get into league play, we're going to have some great games. And today we've had 4 great games. Unfortunately for you as a CSU fan, they're pretty much the only of the 8 teams that played so far today that didn't show up. We had 3 really good games. Obviously, the one that we're going to highlight here that just finished, just some good action down to the wire. I guess games decided by what? 2, 1, 2, just craziness. So awesome action.
Yeah, this game that we're going to focus on, Utah State at San Diego State. I don't know if we're going to get a better game all year. If we do, we are in for a real treat. I was just enthralled that entire second half as Utah State kept denting, and then finally took the lead. It was 6.8, 6.9 seconds to go on a 3 ball by Tyler Anderson, and hung on as who was it that missed? Was it Davis that missed the three-pointer?
Yeah.
That missed the three-pointer. So 67-66
win.
I
think it was McKinney.
Oh, it was McKinney. Okay. Well, that was probably the wrong guy, but but at that point it was kind of hectic. Everybody out of timeouts.
Yep.
But why don't you give your top-down view, your 30,000-foot view of the game and what you saw?
Well, I think there's 2 things that you got to mention. One, and I hate doing this, but I have to say, like, there was a game-changing call in there that really kind of changed the outcome. I mean, that was a pretty bad block charge call on Bird. Utah State was down 7 at the time. Miles Bird was well outside the restricted arc. He was planted and he was set, and Martinez took off, Air Jordan style, and they called the block. Now, look, it was one play, but if they call that the other way, you're not shooting, but it's San Diego State ball up 7 with a minute and a half left or whatever it is. Instead, Martinez doesn't miss from the foul line. The circus shot went in. It's a 4-point game. They come down the other end, take a bad shot, and Anderson hits another 3. So just like that, it was a 1-point game. Now, look, you have to be able to play beyond that, okay? So credit Utah State for Tucker Anderson making the 3 to win the game, the defensive stops in there, everything that happened after that. But if that call is called properly a charge, San Diego State wins the game. Now, that being said, Utah State probably outplayed them for the entire second half. It's tough for me to say they deserve to win. Both teams, deserve to win in a sense. But Utah State, the difference in the game was their matchup zone. And frankly, I was a little surprised. I won't use any other word, but I'll use surprised that San Diego State did not have better zone offense all game long. I was close to tweeting it out 5 minutes into the game that I didn't think they were running good zone offense, but they were kind of scoring a little bit, some of it on second chance points, some of it on pressure defense. They made a couple threes, but I didn't think they were running good zone offense. And then, it really bad in the second half. Credit Utah State for their defense, but I thought poor something, whether it's preparation, execution, game plan, whatever it is, not good enough when you had a week off. They're throwing it at you. They played it 95+% of the time this year for Calhoun, the Aggies have. It's coming. You got to be ready for it. And it's not just the fact that they're missing shots, Steve. How many possessions did they have in the second half where the shot clock was running down 7, 6, 5, and they're not even close to getting a shot off? Like, that's what I mean by bad offense. Too many guys standing around. The ball doesn't move. What do you need in zone offense? You need the ball to move, and you need players to move. And they didn't have it at all. They were just bad offensively in the second half. And from that standpoint, credit Utah State, and they deserve in that aspect to get the W.
Getting back to the officiating, I can see why they called that foul on Bird. He did have a little bit of upper body movement, but it's rare to see those calls go against the Aztecs in Viejas. I would point to two earlier calls that they didn't make, or they did make and didn't make, where I thought Utah State kind of got the wrong end of a call or non-call. Falslev, it must have been 10, 12 minutes left in the second half, went hard to the basket, and Miles Heide leaned his shoulder into him, knocked him to the ground, and there was a no call on that, and I thought that was an obvious foul. And then they called an offensive foul on Anderson, and I believe I can't remember if it was McKinney or BJ Davis. Definitely jumped up and leaned in, and I thought they called an offensive foul on Anderson. That could have gone the other way easily as well. So
sure.
I thought that call was, you could go either way. Getting to the offense, one of the things that I thought was interesting, and as a fan of CSU, I get to watch a coach who understands offense, and I've talked to both him and I've talked to Tim Miles when Tim was coaching at CSU. And they always told me that one of the great mistakes that a lot of coaches make when they run offense against a really good matchup zone is they start running zone offenses instead of running their man-to-man offenses. And it looked like for the longest time, San Diego State was running this zone offense, and they keep on running a guy into the middle of this matchup zone like you do against a 2-3, and it wasn't working. They'd either turn it over in the paint or kick the ball back out and start from 30 feet again. Is that kind of what you were seeing?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. So look, like they at this point offensively don't have what you would call like a hub that you can park at the high post to make plays. Like Guath is phenomenal defensively, right? But I don't know at this point yet that he's going to catch and turn around and hit a 15-footer with regularity, or when he or Coleman Jones or any of those other guys are catching and turning and putting on the floor. Yeah, it was a turnover 80% of the time because somebody's coming from behind with a swipe for a strip, or they're looking around and nobody's there. So you're absolutely correct. Especially against a match, just run man offense. Like that's an old trick that I learned back from the guy that I used to started coaching with 25 years ago, right? You can't fall into that trap because that's exactly what they want you to do. A good zone. Yeah. Like it's made to trick you. And yeah, they were running zone offense and they just didn't have the movement and the personnel, like, especially at that high post area. That's where, like, if you had a Falslev type of guy or Martinez, they would just torch it. Somebody like a 6'6", 6'7" guy who's got some length that can make a mid-ranger, and they don't really have that right now. Like maybe if Reese Waters was healthy, that could be Reese Waters right now. Again, Miles Bird sat much of the second half with foul trouble, but it was just not. So look, maybe they'll watch some film and they'll learn from it when they go play at the Spectrum in 6 weeks or whenever it is. But today, it just wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I like I said, I thought I was just shocked how poor they executed. And like you said, the first half, a lot of it was just dominating the glass early and then making a bunch of threes. And then they spent the entire second half. I mean, the only scoring they were pretty much doing the second half was from the free throw line.
Yeah.
It seemed like the last 10 minutes, that's all they all they did. Did you see obviously Utah State came back from they were down at, was it 15, as many as 15?
They were down 18 in the first half.
Yeah. Did you see, and they started creeping back, but it was still a double-digit game, and they came right out of the chute in the second half and just immediately put themselves right back in the game. What did you see that they were doing differently?
Well, you could tell, we've talked about this before, adjustments that coaches are going to make at halftime. I'm sure Calhoun looked at that stat sheet and saw it was an amazing number. The rebounds at the half, Steve, were 16-7 as a team. 7. Utah State had 7 rebounds. Okay, now part of that is San Diego State didn't miss a lot of shots, okay, or there were fouls, so they're not ending possessions with misses. But they also got pretty much, I'd have to look, but 0 or 1 offensive rebounds. So for you to only have 7 rebounds and a half as a team, that's probably not going to get it done. They also hadn't taken a lot of free throws. So what are you going to preach then if you're Calhoun in the locker room? You probably, you're saying, let's stay the course with the match defensively, but let's be more aggressive, attacking the basket, getting to the rim, rebounding, making some effort. And that's what they did right from the start. Those first 4 or 5 minutes, they're attacking, they're drawing fouls, they got to the foul line, and they got some offensive rebounds, some hustle plays. So, one of the key things is this stuff goes forgotten a lot. I used to remember this all the time when I was coaching because stuff would stick in my craw. But, because of all the stuff that happens down the stretch, this stuff gets overlooked. But the end of the first half was really key. Like, who could forget, Nick Boyd, and it's not really a knock on Boyd, but I don't even remember who it was anymore, makes a three for Utah State with 10 seconds left. And Boyd's trying to blitz it up the floor to get a half-court shot off, spin dribbling through three guys, right? And what happens? Falslev picks him clean and goes in for a layup at the buzzer, okay? So they scored 5 points in the last 6-7 seconds of the half. And nobody forgets that, but what's the final margin right there, right? So
exactly.
It's plays like that. They were up 18 after a three. I don't remember who made the three to put them up 18. And they just got lazy. They started to feel themselves a little too much. Utah State got some open threes, which they hadn't really gotten to that point. And then a couple turnovers, loosey-goosey play from the Aztecs. You can't do that. It doesn't matter whether you're up 2 or whether you're up 16. You got to play with the same intensity until the game's over. And they didn't. Utah State kept on the throttle, and that's how they crept back into the game.
You talk about that end of half play. The same thing happened in the CSU New Mexico game. CSU got a steal, and they had 11 seconds left on the clock, and Kyan Evans went flying up the floor and went wildly to the basket.
Mm-hmm.
Got stripped, I believe, by Apple hands, and then the ball went in Donovan Dent's hands in the open floor. And so you were going to see a layup at the buzzer, and that's exact same thing. And it's you got to be smart. You can't just run out of control. And I see so much of that. The one thing I wanted to ask you, have you seen had you seen much of Calhoun before this season?
Honestly, no. I mean, I knew who he was. He's off of the Bob Huggins tree, which might surprise people because Huggins, those who remember Huggins, I remember him all the way back to Cincinnati, but then mostly at West Virginia, he was this big, aggressive, full court man-to-man guy, right? And so here's Calhoun coming in and throwing a completely opposite matchup zone. Well, I think credit to Calhoun, and I've talked to Patrick Mayhorn from the Ag Ship about this, where that came from. And I think the fact was he played against it in the Horizon when he was at Youngstown State and was really his teams they struggled with it because nobody knows how to play it. And he actually plucked the assistant off of the staff. I think it was Northern Kentucky, he said, brought him along with him to teach the match, knowing that, look, I've talked about this before. It's just like with Boeheim for years at Syracuse. You practice against man all the time, Steve, right? You practice against man. You practice against man, whether it's your team, the other team, whoever you're playing, you practice against man. You have all your sets for against man. And then here comes one game in the middle of the week, out of nowhere, and you got 2 practices to prepare for a zone. So while it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, I'm kind of surprised that Dutcher and his staff didn't have a better offensive game plan against the match, until you've seen it and played against it with the players, the caliber of Utah State, it's not that easy to do. That's how Jim Boeheim won 1,000 games at Syracuse over 30 years, right? But to answer your question, I know he was very good, more of an offensive coach at Youngstown State. That was a very bad program before he took over. He never made the NCAA tournament with them, but he got them a regular season title, and he was in the mix for bids in the conference tournament, and they never were before Youngstown State. So obviously he knows what he's doing. So we're seeing that play out.
The one thing that I was, obviously the defense is impressive, but the thing that I was really impressed with, and especially in the second half, was their execution of plays out of timeouts is outrageous. I mean, and I think we have a good coach in Fort Collins with Nico doing that stuff, but they ran so much good stuff. And I was laughing because, we're watching the last whatever 30 seconds of the game. And I'm watching with my son. He goes, "Oh, they need to take a timeout." And I said, "They already know what they're doing." and they knew, because they had gone through a timeout, and they knew exactly what they were doing on offense. And Anderson, he got an open look, but he knew where he was going to be. They knew where he was going to be, and they didn't necessarily run a play for him, but they ran an action where if somebody was going to get open, and they ran it, and he was there, and he didn't hesitate. He took it right away. And And just the whole second half, they seemed to run Anderson, they ran a play for him earlier. You've seen him run plays for like Templin,
Yep.
all kinds of guys that are and Falslev, obviously they run out of bounds, baseline out of bounds plays for Falslev. So
to your point, it was under 8 minutes. I think it was a 4-point game. The under 8 timeout was pending on the next whistle, and he called a timeout, which many coaches would not do because you have one coming on the next whistle. He called a timeout, drew up a play, and got Templin running to the rim for a slip and a layup. So that was one that you're referencing. And then later, out of a timeout or a dead ball underneath, they got a layup for Falslev. You don't get those very often at this level, right? You just don't. Like, very few teams do because it's scouted so well. There's so much body and length inside the way teams defend underneath. You don't get layups very often. You see that stuff in high school or lower levels because the size isn't there. So for Utah State to get that, like you said, incredible execution, 100% yes.
Yeah. I could, if you want, I can bring up the box score. Anything you want to point out or take a look at in the box score?
You've already mentioned him, Tucker Anderson. He's a guy who came in as a reputation as a shooter. Last year, I think he was freshman of the year in the Atlantic Sun, or at least first team in the Atlantic Sun. He came in with a reputation as a shooter. He has not shot the ball well at all this year. I think he's like in the 20s percentage wise from the three. So what is he today? 4 for 5, or what is that? 4 for 7. 4 for 7. Man, my contacts are so bad after all day long. But yeah, but he's 4 makes right there. I mean, that's huge. Barnes again gets the lion's share of the minutes as a former walk-on, as a point guard. I mean, that's just incredibly impressive. So they ended the game then with, where do we see rebounds? 27, and they had 7 at halftime. So a much, much better job in the second half of grabbing rebounds, just kind of executing a game plan, like you said.
Yeah, here's the split box. Rebounds ended up 31-27. I thought the one thing I wanted to point to was if you go back, go to the lead, the time that teams were in the lead. This is something that always drives me crazy. When they talk about stealing a game, you don't steal a game by getting lucky. You steal a game by fighting and fighting and fighting until the very end. And here's San Diego State at home leading for basically 37 minutes of the game.
Yep.
And Utah State led for less than 2 minutes of lead time, and they took that final lead right at the very end. And that, I always hate when people talk about, they stole it. Well, you don't steal it unless you have it. You go in and you play hard for 40 minutes.
You hang around when things aren't going your way, and when the other team is rolling and playing well, and you have your guys understand that it's a game of runs. Let them make their run now. You guys stay the course and hang in there and make the next play and win the next 4 minutes. And that's exactly what they did. So, I mean, that's huge. I mean, like you said, and it's funny. So had that last minute not happen, like right around the time of that block charge call, when it looked for all the world like the Aztecs were going to escape with a win in a game that they did not play super well, my thought was going to be, well, look, they relied on their defense to get it done here. A little, not really home cooking, but just the vibes at home. Wasn't a raucous crowd. They're a nice crowd, obviously, always is there and loud, but wasn't as raucous as you'll get on a Wednesday night when the students are there in early February against a Utah State or New Mexico or a top contender. But I mean, that's what it looked like. Like, they're going to survive at home, win the games you have to at home, win it with your defense, and then Utah State made the plays down the stretch to win the game. That's all there was to it.
Yeah, it was something. I was going to ask you, anybody that surprised you, good or bad, for San Diego State today?
Well, look, here's what I will say. If you're Miles Bird, he had 1 foul at halftime. Okay. He had 1 foul at halftime. And I know he's got a little bit of Jalen House in him, right? Where he feeds off of energy. Some created by the fans, some created by himself, some created by the opponents, a combination of all that, right? And it's probably frustrating sometimes as his coach. It's probably frustrating sometimes as a fan, but it's what gets him or them, in House's case, the two of them individually, to play better. But like you got to know, and the fifth excluding the fifth, because that was, I don't blame him for that. But when he comes back in the game with 3 fouls, or gets his second early in the half, and then if they're starting to call it a little bit tighter, you gotta be smarter than that. You have to be smarter than that. You scored 14. Well, he had 14. He fouled out 14. I think he had 12 at halftime. So you're making shots, you're making plays. You're driving to the hole. You're finishing in the mid range. You're rebounding. You're playing D. They need you on the floor. It's not the time to let your emotions and some frustrations with the whistle get the better of you. You got to be better than that, and kind of be on the floor for your team at the end of the game, or more of the second half, I should say.
Yeah, the Jalen House comp is actually a really, really good one, and if you talk to people from New Mexico, as much as they love Jalen House, when he was hot, the team rode him, but he could be so up and down and do some things that would cost his team as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Bird might have cost them a little bit in the second half. I thought, the biggest surprise for me was not that Nick Boyd had a bad game. He had some good plays, but I thought we might see a little more organizational kind of leadership out of him. And I never really saw him get San Diego State organized. And I thought that was kind of one of the things that hurt the Aztecs in the second half. I could be off on that.
No, I think that's a fair point. Cause look, he should be he's the point guard. He should be the coach on the floor. I know it's his first season with the team, but he was given the keys, especially with Reese Waters out now. Obviously Miles Bird is the most veteran player they have in terms of returning minutes and production. But with Waters out and Boyd being the primary ball handler, let's get us in something and direct the guys to move or do something other than just kind of dribbling, into a zone, which doesn't work very well, dribbling it down to a corner and into a trap. Get your guys moving, be a vocal leader out there. Instead, you see him waving to the crowd when he wants to get the crowd on their feet defensively. You got to do that in different that should manifest itself in different ways with your guys to coach them up on the floor. And he should be, I believe he has that presence and respect from his teammates that they're going to, move here, cut here, point. You see guys do that all the time. I'm sure you saw Isaiah Stevens do that 50 times the last few years, point, to guys to move on the floor while you're running a set, instead of just kind of creating that chaos / hectic offense, I guess, that they settled for far too much in the second half.
Yeah, I watched Donovan Dent do that today.
Yeah.
He's directing the whole time he's out there, and even when he's against a defense that's designed to stop him, he's still directing everybody, and that's pretty impressive. In terms of we can wrap up here before we wrap up. We're about 420 people watching right now, which is awesome. Yeah. Where are people watching from? Do we have Utah State fans out there, San Diego State fans, New Mexico fans looking to hear us talk a little bit about New Mexico? Any people from Laramie? Let us know if where you're watching from. But what do you think? So where do you put Utah State overall? Here we go. We got somebody watching from New Mexico. Aaron Romero. There we go.
All right.
From New Mexico. That's awesome. Here we go. Here we go. We got New Mexico fans.
Oh, yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, so look, I mean, the fact of the matter is, you have to have Utah State number one right now in the conference. There's no way. You have to. I mean, they just won on the road at the team who was number one. They also only have one loss. Okay, they only have one loss. So they deserve to be number one. There's, I don't even know, because maybe 3 undefeated teams, 4 at most in the country. So let's not fault them and now they just won back-to-back road games at St. Mary's, and at San Diego State. So remember when they had this vaunted 4-game stretch here coming on the road, and then they lost the first one at home to in theory, the worst of those 4 teams, UCSD. And everybody, then all the haters that, they didn't play anybody, that it's a fraudulent record, blah, blah, blah. They're saying 0-4, 0-4, all that stuff, right? North Dakota, I like it. Okay.
I love it. I hope you're a fan of Tim Miles from North Dakota State. I hope.
That's right. So they were going to go 0-4 in this stretch because the next 3 were all on the road. Well, here we go. They just won at St. Mary's and at San Diego State. So look, there's no doubt about it. They deserve to be number 1. San Diego State will still be number 2. New Mexico, I think I'm going to have them jump Boise into the 3rd slot. They look much better here lately. We can talk. You saw that game up close and personal today, and we've talked about this before. It's, to me, one of the big things to me, and why it's so hard to win on the road is that your role players have to step up and make plays. We talked about Tucker Anderson doing that today for Utah State. He has not shot the ball well all year. You wouldn't expect him to go on the road here and make 4 threes in Viejas. He did. That's one of the reasons Utah State won the game. New Mexico today in the first half, they get 3s from Borovichinin, Milicevic, Applehands. Then Dotson makes 2 in a row in the second half. Now, by that point, they had the game in hand, but they stretched it out in the first half with those role players making 3s, stuff that you don't know if you're going to get it. Let's be honest. Do they have the potential to do it? Sure they do. Have they done it all year? Of course not. Is it easy to do on the road? No way. So credit them. They've looked good. I'm not really knocking Boise today for struggling with San Jose State because we know what Tim Miles can do. The Spartans have been playing really well. But I like what I've seen here for New Mexico in the last few games now. They're 2-0 in the conference. Their last 2 games are wins over VCU and at CSU. So they're trending up.
Just to talk real briefly about New Mexico, I did my post game, and I thought they were very, very good today. I love Donovan Dent. He runs a great screen and roll with Nelly Jr. Joseph, and CSU absolutely focused on shutting that down and did a great job. I think if you look at the way they defended those 2 players, that'll be a blueprint. The problem is, of course, like you said, these other guys started Borovichinin going 4 for 4 in the first half with a pair of 3s.
Yep.
I talked with Jeff Grammer before the game. I did something. I dropped a silver dollar off for his daughter. He picks Mountain West games and has his daughter flip a coin.
Yeah.
I gave her the magic silver dollar today. We talked about the teams, and he specifically called out Borovichinin, and he said, this kid, Jeff says, I go to practice all the time, and this kid is unbelievable in practice. And then he comes to games, and he plays with absolutely zero confidence. And he said, at some point, maybe it'll click.
Yep.
And then about mid to late first half, I get a note from another friend of mine. I don't know if you know there's a guy named Brandon Goebel who goes on X as JUCO advocate.
Okay.
And he does a lot of placement of junior college players, but he also does a lot of recruiting in Europe. And he's a CSU grad, and he's a CSU season ticket holder. I ran into him before the game. Anyway, he was at the game, and he shoots me a text, and he says, I'm sorry, but I'm the one that found Philippe in a Cold War gym in Belgrade, and I was the one that got him placed in the United States.
Nice.
And it was hilarious. And I actually had him. Grammer was going to. They were going to talk to each other. Grammer, I think, was going to do a story on it. But this kid, if he Brandon says this kid's an NBA talent. And he completely had his confidence stripped at the University of Arizona. Okay. And he's one of those kids that has a lot of potential. We know about that. We know about Nelly Jr. Joseph and Amzil's become a very consistent player.
Yep.
If they get that 4th player, and then the defensive True Washington, and then C.J. Nolan coming off the bench.
Mhm.
They looked really, really potent today. And CSU obviously struggled with what the defense with the fast hands and the length, and it just murdered them in the first half. But I was impressed, and I think they are easily one of the top three. I thought they'd be top two this year, but easily one of the top three, and I still think they have a ton of upside. So here we go. Somebody saying, Coach Pitino says often, I know Philippe, he has it.
Yep.
It's true. We have somebody here. Here we go. Let's get into some of the other stuff. Can we talk about how good Wyoming is looking? Wasn't expecting that. Did you get to watch any of that game?
I did. I actually watched more of that than the Boise game because it just kind of, the CSU game was over so fast that I got to watch much of the first half and then pretty much the whole second half. The first half was really sloppy, but the second half was a great half of basketball. Like, both teams shot the ball well. They executed well. I mean, look, here's the thing. I know it's tough to recruit there, but man, like he's got – his guys are, the saying, like, the sum is greater than the whole of its parts, or whatever, right? You're trying to say, like, they are achieving far beyond what they should be achieving, because they for the most part, and you can see he's trying to break it in all of their guys. They're playing to their capabilities and not above it. And that was an issue he had earlier in the season with guys like Dante Allen, who was a former, like, 5-star Kentucky recruit, because he was like a million-point scorer in a high school in Kentucky. And he didn't make it there and went somewhere else, and now he's here. And early in the season, he started to play he was playing like he was better than the other guys on the roster because of his pedigree, okay? Well, you see, Coach Sundance has coached that out of him now, because he comes in the game and he plays to his capabilities and not beyond. And that's coaching, okay? He's not trying to do too much. And that's the same thing with all of his guys. Not to say they don't make any mistakes, but they do what he wants them to do on both ends of the floor. They're maximizing their potential and their ability. They don't have the ability that Utah State did last year, but it would not surprise me if they escape out of that, like, bottom four where they've been pigeonholed into for the last few years, and kind of start moving up here and getting into that middle tier, I think, to be honest.
The biggest surprise is this Agman kid is.
Oh, he's fantastic.
He's unbelievable. He is he's wiry, and he's not the kind of guy you'd think would be as dominant as he can be, but my gosh, he can elevate, and he's quick, and he's got a very fast release. And he's the number, how many times I watched, I didn't see the whole game, but I saw enough where I don't know how many step backs he took where he was putting people on their butts.
It's funny you say that. I sent out a tweet probably in the early part of the second half that he reminds me of Iverson. Now, obviously, he's nowhere near the talent that Iverson was, right? And it's been such a crazy day with all the games going on and dinner and everything here that I have not had a chance to go through and look at my comments. So maybe I'm getting ripped for that. But, like, look, he for his size, I was just saying, for his size, his ability to get to and finish at the rim and shoot step backs and all of that stuff, it reminds me of Iverson. He's obviously not the same ability and talent-wise as Allen Iverson, but for a size, he's a fantastic player for them. I mean, earlier on in here, I was like, man, he's a poor man's, like, Sam Griffin and Aquel Cott that they had last year. Now, like, he's better than those guys, and those guys were pretty good players last year for them.
Well, and Cott, I believe he came from the same school as Cott.
Correct.
They're Fort Lewis, which is a D2 school out in Durango, Colorado. And I'm surprised so many people missed on him that he ended up. I mean, there's a kid that's playing for CU that CSU went after. That played at Mesa State, and none of them talked to Agman at all, and he absolutely torched everybody. Here's a note: Pit Press Live. Armac MVP, tournament MVP, 33 points in the championship. Great game. Yep. And Wyoming got him. I don't know if they had the relationship with him because he is from he's from Denver. He's a kid from Denver, and Wyoming has a lot of contacts in Denver. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. He may have gone. He went to Rangeview. I'm trying to remember if that's where Graham Ike went. So Ike's
Well,
from that
better.
particular area.
I don't know if he has any more years of eligibility left, but they'll be after him in 4 months from now if he does. So you know how that works.
It's crazy. So
Yeah.
you didn't get a chance to watch much of Boise and
I
San
didn't
Jose,
see much
did you?
of it. I saw the last few minutes. I mean, I didn't see enough to be able to talk about it a lot. So I mean, look, Boise did what they had to do. I don't think they guarded very well, but they made enough plays down a stretch. And the very end, Miles, I don't know if you saw it or not, but it was 5.5 seconds left, and they were down 2 shooting 1. I think a lot of coaches may make that and then foul and try to extend it that way. He called timeout, so you knew he was going to have his guy miss it. And he had a fantastic miss off the back of the rim, and it sprung up like 10 feet in the air. And his guy went up and grabbed the offensive rebound, power dribble, and went up to finish for the tie like in the last second or two. And Buchanan came out of nowhere with a clean block. It was a fantastic play, and that saved the game. So it was a well-played game. I had it on the phone while I was watching the Nevada game, and I could see bits and pieces of it. But, good game, and that's what you expect out of San Jose State. They got some guys that can score the ball. They're not quite up there with the top teams, but good for Boise to get out of there with a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about Miles. He's done it. Lost. He had Boise beat last year, and then they fell apart in the last 10 minutes.
Yep.
I can't remember. Was last year the year they gave San Diego State a good game, and then they had a block.
Early last year they did, yeah.
And somebody got a big block like right at the end that
allowed that preserve. Saved the game.
Yeah, there it was a 1-point win. It's very similar to what you saw today, and so they're just that's Miles. I love him, and he's always going to have his team ready. And of course, CSU gets to play them on New Year's Eve. I don't know if you want to do a game on New Year's Eve or not. I think we have is Utah State, Nevada on New Year's Eve? I can't remember.
There's I think so the two Boise at Wyoming and which is now turning into a really fascinating game, and then Utah State at Nevada. So those are late here on the East Coast. So let me see what's going on here. I'd like to. I don't know if it'll work, but we'll see if we can figure something out. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to do that or and then we always next weekend I think San Diego State goes to Boise State. I could be wrong on that, but I think that would
I don't think they do. Maybe you're right, but I thought it was.
Or maybe it's somebody goes.
No,
to
you
Boise
might be right. You might be right. It's possible you are correct. Yes.
Knowing how well Boise plays against San Diego State, the Aztecs could be on the ropes. I got to share something funny with you before we go. You get it all the time. Jeff Grammer gets it all the time. I don't get it because I'm not as controversial as you guys, but Grammer put something out that's kind of a mid-season view, a new ranking of the Mountain West. And he talked about San Diego State being the top team and, how he had them 5th in the preseason. And a San Diego State fan started getting all over him saying, well, you're crazy. You should always pick them for first place. And I fired back, well, if he did that last year, they finished 5th last year.
Yeah, he would have been off by 4 spots. Yeah, last year.
And he would have been off. And then the guy fires back, well, they were better at the end of the year. And I fired back, they were better at the end of the year. But did you know that Utah State and CSU beat higher seeded teams in the NCAA tournament than San Diego State? They had it. They were a very good team, and I'm not ripping on San Diego State. It's more that we get fans with these just crazy thoughts, and they don't accept the fact this conference is absolutely brutal, and that's what makes it fun. You can't predict. That's what we were talking about to start the show, and that's how we'll end the show. I love the predictability. You love it. That's what brought you to this conference in the first place, right?
That's right.
So anyway, we'll get together again. Here we go. Here's a New Mexico fan. They drive me crazy. I have a lot of Lobo fan friends now. I made I sat the last 8 minutes with CJ Nolan's dad after having it on my stream on Thursday night. I said, "Where are you sitting?" He said he told me where he was sitting, and I said, "I'll come join you shortly. This game is over." So I sat the last 8 minutes with him.
Nice.
That was fun. So anyway, it was great. Tom, thank you once again. This has been a great show. We got to let you go. It's getting late for you.
Sir. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
We just hit 500 viewers. So everybody out there, thank you. We're going to keep this thing going, keep this thing growing. Look for us next week as Tom and I decide which games which games we cover on tonight in the Mountain West. Congratulations to the winners today: Utah State, New Mexico, Boise State, Wyoming.
All right.
Well done, folks. See you, Tom. Have a great weekend.
All right, buddy. Thanks for joining, everybody. See you, Steve.
You bet. Bye now.